Speaking of this last year, just general big picture before we get into some specifics, what sort of surprised you most about cryptocurrency in general in 2020, and how will that inform your decisions into this next year?
That's a good question. I think what surprised me, probably how fast Gold 2.0 narrative took off with institutions. As soon as it was de-risked from a career risk perspective, because it's a chicken and egg problem where if no legitimate institutional investor buys it, then if you recommend it at your fund, you look like a crazy person or a lunatic, and you might get cut or you may not get a bonus that year. But as soon as people legitimize it, now they've reduced that career risk. And I think I underestimated how quickly that loop goes into effect. For me, I thought it would be like a multi-year sort of thing. But what we're seeing is it's a multi-month process where as it gets de-risked and then the price goes up, people become more aware of it. And then hedge funds are like, well, why wouldn't I want to? I mean, a normal hedge fund return that's good is like 5 to 7%. That's like phenomenal hedge fund returns. And we just got that in 12 hours in Bitcoin, right? So for these guys, if they can manage people's money and they take their 2 and 20, which is a 2% management fee and 20% of the upside, why wouldn't you want to speculate on Bitcoin, especially when the career risk has gone down? It's increasingly legitimized. So if the trade goes bust, you're like, well, look, Paul Tudor Jones did it in Guggenheim, and JP Morgan and Citi analysts said that it was going to go up, to where it's kind of like investing in Bitcoin for these funds is kind of like the 2008 financial crisis a little bit, where everyone invested in these mortgage-backed securities. And you're not wrong. In Wall Street, you're not wrong if everyone's wrong. So it's kind of the opposite version of the career risk, where the career risk has been so minimized that everyone piles into the same trade, because if everyone does the same trade, then no one was wrong. So with Bitcoin, we could very much see it become that. And that's where the price could have a huge amount of appreciation as people call up their, LPs or the limited partners in these funds call up the fund managers and like, why aren't we in Bitcoin? Your competitor rival hedge fund just had a 40% return this year. So it's sort of this beautiful, just very basic game theory of whoever gets in last will have a poorer return. And this is a good thing. It's not a Ponzi scheme mechanic. It's a good thing because for any new money to be incepted or adopted, more and more folks have to believe in it. And the speculative nature of Bitcoin just feeds into a basic human dynamic, which speculation is a core part of any asset and how it's priced. But with this, it actually increases the adoption of Bitcoin through price appreciation. The signal is the price goes up, people become aware of it, they buy in anticipation of it going higher. Then more people become aware of it, more products and services are built around it. People go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole like you guys did. I think you guys came in the 2017 bubble, right?
We came
Exactly.
in, yeah, I guess I've heard about it in 2013. Goddamn, wish I would have gotten
Didn't
involved.
do anything with it then. Then in 2016, kind of was like watching it, and then 2017 really got into it. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes time, right? It takes time to really get into it. And I'm not going to pretend that I perfectly understood it when I first heard about it. It took me a long time to figure it out. And so, now we've got huge liquidity. We've got great education. I mean, the educational content, which you guys put out, the podcast out there, the long form articles and tweets and everything, even the TikTokers, everyone's part of the Bitcoin marketing team to talk about Bitcoin, to propagate the narrative of why it's valuable. And it's just so much better than it was before. I mean, before it was like Andreas Antonopoulos, and he's great, but he was like the only guy who was a good speaker that you would like, if you had to nominate one Bitcoiner to go talk to someone about Bitcoin, to be like, oh, well, let's tap in Andreas. And over time, there's a huge roster now. We got a big team that can go in and explain Bitcoin simply to someone new who might be really influential.
Totally. And, I know what you mean when I think Bitcoin, or I think Gold 2.0 is such a clear narrative for Bitcoin this time. Because when I was coming in 2016, 2017, Bitcoin is a better money, but I don't really understand what that meant. Obviously, I'm comparing it to Venmo. It's just, it was confusing. But Gold 2.0, I think, is such a clear narrative that everybody can get behind, especially seeing, the dollar get devalued. So,
and I call that narrative compression. Like, it's the compression of like a lengthy narrative, like, oh, Bitcoin has gold-like properties, and you could wax on poetically about why it's a Gold 2.0. or you just compress it all into like, it's gold 2.0. You don't know exactly what that means if you heard it for the first time, but you understand why it's valuable. And so, yeah, I totally agree. We have narrative market fit with the market cycle, which is huge. With 2017, there were still like the B cashers on the Bitcoin Cash side who very much, I think that narrative, and you guys are storytellers because you guys, live out in LA and that's part of your profession, is to tell stories. And I feel like that's what I like to do with Bitcoin. And I weave stories about Bitcoin's origin and whatnot. When we look at the narrative of like the P2P cash narrative, like the payments narrative, some folks go, oh, well, what's the harm in having two narratives? And I was like, well, we had a civil war because of it. It literally a civil war of brother against brother. I mean, Roger bought my first company. So like I know Roger really well. And we literally had a civil war, and then it was damaging to the store value narrative. It's like if you try out a product and it's totally different than what you expected, you're probably not going to go try it again. So the folks championing the payments narrative, people come in and they have a really awkward experience buying coffee. And they're like, well, that was dumb. Why would I want to use Bitcoin for that? Then they miss out on the bigger narrative and the more narrative market fit product of that Bitcoin stores value well. It's a gold 2.0. So with this bull run, we don't have any of that confusion. It's great. It's phenomenal. It means that like the narrative cohesion with the market is perfect versus in 2017, it was like kind of actually a headwind against Bitcoin's progress because you had the Bitcoin Cash hard fork happen in 17, and that led to a lot of anxiety around which one is the real Bitcoin and everything else. So I think that this market cycle is really, really nicely distinct and clear, which also gives it the opportunity to be even more intense or different than previous cycles.
How long do you think it'll be till central banks around the world start adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets?
That's a phenomenal question and something I daydream about, because that you start to be really, that if there were a couple KPIs to determine if Bitcoin has hit gold 2.0 status, that would be one of them, right? Because central banks have historically used gold to back their local fiat currency. So that would be a KPI of like Bitcoin's made it. It doesn't mean Bitcoin's done appreciating in value or that it's won, that it's made it to like the final battle, and it's like
Absolutely.
a legitimate contender. And so for me, yeah, like the central banks buying Bitcoin, I didn't anticipate the institutional money flowing in this rapidly. I think Bitcoin needs to get much larger though for the sovereign wealth funds and central banks to start to get in. They have trillions of dollars in assets and they need to deploy money at scale. So they can't go buy just $1 billion of Bitcoin. They needed to buy like 10 billion. And that's actually a lot. That right now, Bitcoin's market cap isn't high enough to support liquidity at that sort of scale without really moving the price. But Bitcoin at $1 trillion market cap or 5 trillion, now you're looking at Bitcoin really being able to allow the largest market participants, the sovereign wealth funds, the central banks to start buying it. So I think it's when we reach $1 trillion plus is when we start to see central banks buy Bitcoin for the first time and announce it.
All right. That was some great perspective. I like it. Hey, if you want to watch the full interview, check the description below, link and details how to do that. And make sure you subscribe to our channel. We drop a video every day, daily coverage, everything there is to know involving Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. We'll keep you informed. We're dropping another video tomorrow, so subscribe to the channel and I'll see you then.